Welcome to What's Math. Please subscribe to my channel, like and share my videos. This video will focus on factoring quadratics when a is not equal to 1. When a is not equal to 1, we are going to factor by grouping. Step 1, find the product of a times c. Step 2, find the two factors of a times c that will give you b using the technique for when a is equal to 1. Step 3, rewrite by replacing b with the factors of a times c. Step 4, simple factor both pairs of expressions. Step 5, your answer will be in the format of outside times inside. Example, factor 10x squared plus 11x plus 3. If we analyze the example, we notice that 10 is a because that's the coefficient of x squared, and 11 is b because that's the coefficient of x, and positive 3 is c because that's the constant. First, we need to find the product of a times c. So therefore, a times c will equal to 10 times 3, which is equal to positive 30. If you notice, I put the plus sign there because it's positive and it's going to come in handy in the next step. Find the two factors of a times c that will give you b. Use the technique for when a is equal to 1. So what do we want to know? We want to know two numbers that multiply to give me 30, but if I add them, it will equal to 11. And those two numbers are 5 and 6. 5 times 6 is equal to 30, and 5 plus 6 is equal to 11. Since a times c is positive, we know that both factors have to have the same sign. And you may ask why. A positive times a positive is equal to a positive. A negative times a negative is equal to a positive. So in both situations, both signs were exactly the same. To figure out which sign it is, we are going to look at the b. And both of them are going to be positive because the b was a positive 11. Now we're going to rewrite by replacing b with the factors of a times c. So 10x squared plus 5x plus 6x plus 3. In your mind, if you should combine like terms, 5x plus 6x is 11x. So that means we did not change the value of the expression. Now we need to simple factor both pairs of expression. So now I'm going to factor the 10x squared plus 5x and put it in its prime factorization state. So the first one is going to be 2 times 5 times x, which is 10x squared, plus 5 times x. We want to know what both terms have in common. You can see that both of them has a 5 in common. They also have an x in common. This is very important. No uncircled remaining, we should always use a 1. Something times 1 is always equal to itself. What they have in common is known as the greatest common factor, the GCF, and that goes on the outside of the parentheses, and everything that is left uncircled goes inside the parentheses from left to right. See, we have a 2 times x, which is 2x, followed by a plus sign, and since there is nothing left uncircled with the 5x, we're going to use a 1. Let's double check. 5x times 2x is 10x squared. 5x times 1 is 5x. So I got the first pair back by multiplying if I should distribute in my mind. We're supposed to simple factor the last pair, but I'm going to give you a shortcut. If done properly, both parentheses will be exactly the same. So the second parentheses is also going to be 2x plus 1. And if you notice, I leave a space in between because we're missing the greatest common factor that goes between the two parentheses. Here's a shortcut to find it. It's always going to be the c divided by the last in the parentheses. In the problem given, c is equal to 3, positive 3. In the parentheses, the last in the parentheses are positive 1. So positive 3 divided by positive 1 is equal to positive 3. So therefore, the greatest common factor that goes in the front is a plus 3. Now we're down to our answer. And our answer will always be the outside times the inside, going from left to right. On the outside is a 5x followed by a plus 3. And inside the parentheses was 2x plus 1. And that would be your final answer. Important is also to note that 2x plus 1 times 5x plus 3 is also correct. Example. Factor 6x squared minus 11x minus 10. We need to find the product of a times c. If we take a good look, a is 6 and c is negative 10. So therefore, a times c is equal to 6 times negative 10, which is equal to negative 60. We need to find the two factors of a times c using a technique for when a is equal to 1. So the two factors of a times c that will give me b using the technique when a is equal to 1. So what do I want to know? I want to know two numbers that multiply to give me 60, but if I subtract, is equal to 11. You notice I did not read the sign on the 11. So let's repeat. Two numbers that multiply to give me 60, but when I subtract, it is equal to 11. And it's 4 and 15. 4 times 15 is equal to 60, and 15 minus 4 is equal to 11. Now, a times c is a negative 60. And what do we know about negative products? A positive times a negative is equal to a negative, and a negative times a positive is equal to a negative. So in both situations, the signs are different. So how do we know which one gets which sign? If you notice b is a negative 11. The biggest factor, which is 15, must be negative because it was a negative 11. So the biggest factor always take the sign of b. Now let's rewrite. 6x squared plus 4x minus 15x minus 10. And if we should combine like terms, you will see that in your mind it will be 4x minus 11x, which is equal to negative 11x. So therefore the expression stays the same. We're going to simple factor both pairs of expression. The first one is 6x squared plus 4x. I'm going to break it down in its prime factorization state. So it's going to be 2 times 3 times x plus 2 times 2 times x. Now we need to figure out what does each term have in common. They both have a 2 in common. They also have an x in common. So the greatest common factor will be 2x because that's what they have in common. Remember, your greatest common factor goes on the outside, and whatever is remained on circle goes on the inside of our parentheses. So it's going to be 2x open parentheses, and going from left to right, it will be 3x followed by a plus sign followed by a 2. Let's double check. 3x times 2x is 6x squared, and the 2x times the 2 is 4x. So if we distribute the 2x on the outside to everything in the parentheses, we got back the first pair. We're not going to simple factor the second pair because I'm going to use a shortcut. If done properly, both parentheses has to be exactly the same. So if the first one was 3x plus 2, the second one will be 3x plus 2. To find what goes in between the two parentheses, the greatest common factor for that parentheses, the trick is always going to be c divided by the last in the parentheses. And in this case, c was negative 10, and the last in the parentheses is 2. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. And that is the greatest common factor for the second parentheses. So therefore, you're going to put minus 5 in between the two parentheses. Your answer is always going to be the outside times the inside. Going from left to right is going to be 2x minus 5, and inside the parentheses is 3x plus 2, and that's the final answer. Note, 3x plus 2 times 2x minus 5 is also correct. Now let's check for understanding. Factor 8x squared plus 26x plus 11. Solution. Factor 8x squared plus 26x plus 11. First, we need to find out what are the factors of 8 times c. And 8 times 11 is equal to 88, positive 88. We need to find the two factors of 8 times c. That gives us b using the technique when a is equal to 1. So I want to know two numbers that multiply to give me 88, but when I add them, I get 26. And those two numbers are 4 and 22. 4 times 22 is equal to 88. 4 plus 22 is equal to 26. And since a times c was a positive 88, that means both sign has to be the same. Because a positive times a positive equals positive, and negative times a negative is equal to positive. And how do I know which signs am I using? I'm going to check the sign on B. And I realize both of them would be positive because it was a positive 26. And when I rewrite, I have 8x squared plus 4x plus 22x plus 11. If I should combine like term in my mind, 4x plus 22x does equal to 26x. So that means the expression stayed the same. We want to simple factor the first. So 8x is broken down into 2 times 4 times x, and 4x is broken down into 4 times x. I know you can do 2 times 2 for the 4, but if I realized that the 4 was in common, I didn't need to waste time by breaking it down even further. But if you do break it down into 2 times 2 times 2, at the end, it will all be the same answer. But if you see it, you don't have to do it all the way. Now I realize that they both have a 4 in common and an x in common. So the greatest common factor is 4x. So remember, the greatest common factor goes on the outside. Everything else stays on the inside. And if there's nothing left uncircled, we need to use a 1. So it's going to be 4x, open parentheses, x plus 1. And if you distribute it, it will be 4x times 2x, so it's 8x squared, and 4x times 1 is 4x. Remember, both parentheses are going to be exactly the same. To find the GCF of that parentheses, we're going to do c divided by last in the parentheses. So therefore, it's 11 divided by 1, which is equal to 11. So it's going to be a positive 11. Remember, outside times inside. So therefore, it's going to be 4x plus 11 times 2x plus 1. Remember, it doesn't matter which parentheses come first. You could have 2x plus 1 times 4x plus 11, and it would be exactly the same. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Press that little bell for further notification when I post new videos. Like and share my videos. And if you like what you saw in the video, please feel free to buy me a cup of coffee. It's not mandatory. Thank you in advance.